Welcome to our continued introduction to standardized tests. And now we're going to go over word games. Now, when I talk about word games, I don't mean Scrabble or Words with Friends, although it's probably a good idea to play those things. I do mean the quiz questions on the test that, well, play with words. So, the lesson overview is going to go like this. What does a word game question look like? I'm just going to give you two examples and you'll be able to clue into them really quickly. You've seen them before. Then I'll give you some tips on how to solve them very carefully, one at a time. And then finally, we'll go over some examples together. Here is a simple structure of a word game. The graphic novel Watchmen begins with a blank monologue from the anti-hero Rorschach. Then I have four options of what I think should go into that blank. Now, about the only thing I know from this sentence right now is that this word right here needs to be an adjective, and all of these are adjectives. So we will use tricks in a minute to answer this one. What do you do when you have two blanks? Well, that's kind of scary and fun. Basically what's happening here is that we have the tragic hero plots with his wife to blank the king and therefore blank the throne. What do I mean by this? Well, we'd have to figure out which pair actually fits together. Now you might be thinking, oh no, one was tough enough, now I got to do two. Well, it actually turns out that these ones that have two in them are going to be a little easier to answer than the ones that only have one. And I'll show you why later. Now, let's look at these word games and figure out some tricks to answer them. Number one is to find any clue words in the sentence. So, basically any adjective or any keyword that you're used to, or any important noun. I mean, you'll find them all over the place. We got the graphic novel Watchmen begins with a blank monologue from the anti-hero Rorschach. Why is this word important? Because I got to figure out what kind of monologue an anti-hero would give. Now, this does depend on you remembering what an anti-hero was. And an anti-hero is a main character, protagonist, who is not nice and he's mean and he has a bunch of unsympathetic characteristics. Basically, he's a main character that we don't like. So, would you say that the anti-hero gave a cheery monologue? I don't think so. How about meditative? Maybe, possibly, depends on how we feel about meditation. Long-winded, that's not really too much of a qualifier because an anti-hero or a hero can be long-winded and talk for a really long time. The one that I think is the most obvious one is probably this. Spiteful. Nobody likes a spiteful person. So I bet that if it's an anti-hero, they're probably going to give a spiteful monologue. Another rule. Predict what word might fit into the blank. So let's go with this one. The tragic hero, Macbeth, plots with his wife to blank the king and therefore blank the throne. Notice, plots usually means you're planning something not nice. So if you know the story, you know what would go in here. He means to kill the king. But even if you didn't know the story and you don't know that he's planning to kill this king, you know that they're planning to do something bad because Macbeth is a tragic hero and this is a plot. Plots are usually bad things when you're planning them. So I'm probably not going to think that he's going to crown the king. That would be a good thing. And we're not doing that. Maybe he means to flatter the king. You know, give him a bunch of good compliments, make him feel great. Possibly, but not in this story. Now, if you know the story, you know what happens. Well, Macbeth actually wants to seize the throne. So what does he do in order to seize the throne? Well, he murders the king. So I know that this one right here is the correct answer. A is actually tricking you. It's kind of assuming that maybe you don't know what this word here, laud, means. Well, seize is correct, and then we're not sure about laud. But laud means to praise, to talk good of, to adore. Definitely not what happens when you're a tragic hero and you're plotting something. Murder and usurp are the correct answer. Great thing to do is to actually do this. Eliminate any incongruent words. This is why the answers that have 2 are easier, because you just find one incongruent word and you know you can cross it out and you don't have to worry about the other one. So let's read this sentence real quick. The aspiring Olympic runner began a strenuous blank of exercise in order to blank the games. Now, when we're talking about the games and we're talking about Olympic runners, there's no confusion about what games we're talking about. Not the Hunger Games, we're talking about those gold medal games. So, what might be an incongruent word here? Well, C definitely has an incongruent word. Why would an aspiring Olympic runner disown the games? No reason. They want to go there. So let's take a look at the ones that might otherwise be incongruent. How about this word? Attend. Well, attend might be it. So I'll put a question mark over that, but attend's not really the word we're looking for. We do have another incongruent word here, but it's kind of a big one and you might not remember what it is. Does anybody remember from the previous lessons what a soliloquy was? Turns out soliloquy has nothing to do with Olympic athleticism. So I know that's an incongruent word. I've got 2 here. They began a strenuous discipline in order to attend the games, or a strenuous regimen of exercise in order to qualify for the games. Does the runner want to watch the sports or compete in the sports? Do they want to be in the stands cheering people on, or do they want to be the person that's running after the gold? B is our correct answer here. Use root words and prefixes to help guess well. So, go back to those previous lessons and remember those root words that I gave you. And let's figure out what might fit here. Many Americans were accused of blank when they feared to accept Chinese immigrants in the 19th century. So, we got a bunch of words here, and I've never seen these words before. Antipathy, xenophobia, chromophilia, and agoraphobia. Wow, these are unusual words. I've never seen these before. But I remember my root words. PHIL means love. Is there a lot of love for Chinese immigrants going on in this sentence? No, not right now. So I got to know that that's wrong. Antipathy is something about feeling against, so maybe that's the correct answer. And then we have 2 more here. We have phobia and phobia. I'm going to cross out antipathy because I notice a word here, fear, is in the sentence. Phobia means fear, if you remember. So what I would have to do is I would have to figure out which one of these is correct. Is it xenophobia or agoraphobia? Maybe I don't know what either one of those prefixes, xenos or agora, mean, but I have been able to guess down to these last 2. Now, if you go back and you remember your root words, you'll remember what these words mean. And from then, you'll be able to figure out that xenophobia is our correct answer. Now, let's remember all those tricks and let's go over some answers without those examples helping us. Electronic musicians, let's highlight that because it's a who. Use a variety of filters, digital effects, and raw recordings to produce strange and unique blank of musical sound. I have pitches, hues, timbres, and similes. Okay? I'm being tested on my vocabulary here and how well I know these words, but also how well I can figure out what kinds of words these are. What word goes in here has something to do with musical sound. So, I'm going to cross out hues, because hues refers to colors. I'm also going to cross out similes, because similes is a rhetorical technique used in literature. It's got nothing to do with musical sound. This leaves me just 2. I got pitches and I got this French word timbres. Well, those of you who know your music theory or have watched it at educator.com, you know that pitch refers to something that has to do with the level of the sound. So, we're either talking about the level of the sound, whether it's high or low, but I don't really feel that we're using a lot of those effects to talk about how high or low the sound is. So I'm going to go with this word timbres, even though I'm not 100% sure what it means there. Go ahead and check out some of our books or, the musical theory lessons to figure out exactly what timbre means. Here's another exercise. The Lakota tribes of the Great Plains campaign to blank the sacred land from the encroachment of industrial civilization. Know what the Lakota tribes are? Well, they're a lot of the Great Plains Native American tribes. So, what are they most likely doing to protect from the encroachment of industrial civilization? I know that they're wanting to protect because, well, I'm kind of familiar with what's going on here. So what I'm looking here is a synonym that would mean protect. Conceal sort of means protect. Maybe I'm going to hide it. How am I going to hide huge tracts of open land on the Great Plains, though? That's a little tricky. I don't think that's the one. Preserve might be a synonym for protect here. Diminish is a word that means to make smaller. And to cultivate, well, I can definitely cultivate sacred land, but I wouldn't cultivate it from the encroachment of industrial civilization. This leaves our only remaining answer. To preserve, to protect, to guard. That's a word that fits in here. The next exercise, and this one is going to be on tricky vocabulary, and if you can figure out what goes here and here. The prosecuting attorney unfairly, important keyword, blank the witness into a state of blank and confusion. So I know whatever word goes here, it's going to go with confusion. And I know whatever word goes here is going to fit with unfairly. So let's go ahead and go through this. Unfairly taunted. Taunted just means making fun of somebody. So maybe this one might be the correct answer. Not too sure what euphoria means yet, so I'll put a question mark next to that one. Unfairly badgered. Well, I'm maybe not sure what badgered means, but I could see how intimidation matches with confusion, so I'll put a question mark over that one too. Unfairly derided. Derided means to insult, to make fun of. So that seems to fit with unfairly. Enlivened. Unfairly enlivened. Okay, that makes no sense. That's an obvious wrong answer. So what I got here is I got a couple answers here that all look like they could fit. Only managed to eliminate one bad answer so far. So let's look at these carefully. Let's start with this first one. Euphoria. I don't know what euphoria means. I've never seen that word before. However, I do know this. EU is a prefix for good, like euphemism or eulogy. And that does not fit with state of confusion. That makes no sense. Now I'm down to two. Gullibility or intimidation. Badgered or derided. So let's figure out which one of these words is incongruent and doesn't fit, or which one fits better. Let's think about gullibility and confusion. That actually does seem like it fits. Let me ask you this, though. If you're a lawyer, are you trying to trick the witness or the jury? Turns out the best answer is badgered and intimidation. A prosecuting attorney is badgering the witness in order to intimidate him. Gullibility might have fitted here, but you have to think about the context. This is an attorney. This is a courtroom. He's not trying to convince the witness. He's trying to convince the jury. So gullibility doesn't really matter here. This would be an example of a fairly difficult question that you might see on the word games. This last example is another example of kind of a very tricky question. This is an example of something that would be very hard on the test. So let's read it very carefully. Thomas More, in refusing to blank the king's right to remarry, was executed for his blank denial of that right. Very carefully, let's think about some important things in this sentence before we even fill in these blanks. When I talk about that right, what am I referring to? I'm referring to the king's right to remarry. Now, what is implied when someone is executed? Well, it means they got into trouble. In trouble with who? Probably the king here. So, what did Thomas More refuse to do in order to get executed? Well, let's look at some words here. If you denounced the king's right to remarry, and you would get into trouble. But remember, this is what Thomas More refused to do. So, he refused to denounce doesn't make sense. That's kind of a double negative. Let's cross out that one. What if Thomas More refused to affirm? What does affirm mean? Say yes. So, I think that's a possibility. Got in trouble for refusing to say yes. Did he refuse to endorse? What does endorse mean? It means to say yes. So again, refusing to endorse something of the king could get you into trouble. And finally, we have proclaim. Well, if you refuse to proclaim something, you could get into trouble. So far, I've just looked at the first couple sentences, the first word here. And I've eliminated only one obvious bad answer. So let's figure out what's going on next here. We need an adjective that will fit with denial. So he was executed for his something denial of the king's right to remarry. So, is it going to be overt? Well, we don't need to worry about that one because we've already eliminated that answer. Tacit, dogmatic, or belated. What do these words mean? Well, how about belated? If I'm talking about celebrating somebody's belated birthday, what do I mean? Well, I'll give you a clue. Late. So, this would mean that Thomas More was late in denying something that the king wanted. Okay, that makes no sense. Let's cross out that answer. So we got two left. We have affirm and tacit and endorse and dogmatic. Well, if we remember what our vocabulary, we might be able to figure that out really quickly. But if we're not sure what tacit or dogmatic mean, we're set to guessing 50-50. But at least we brought it down to two options. The correct answer is B. Tacit means silent. It means that he was silent in a denial. He never actually said the king doesn't have the right to do this, but he never actually said, yes, he does either. This is a very, very tough question. If you run into a question like this on test day, don't get stuck on it. Find an easier one first. Go back to this kind of question later. So to wrap up, here are your tips. Find those clue words in the sentence. Find the subject of the sentence. Find the important adjectives. Find the important keywords. Find the words that are right next to the blanks because they might be giving you some kind of qualifier in order to get it correct. Predict what word might fit in the blank. Once you do that, compare the answers with synonyms for that word. Always, always, always eliminate incongruent words and you'll bring that down to 2 of 4 or 3 of 4 right away. Most importantly, memorize those words and those prefixes, and that'll help you when you have to guess. Thanks a lot for using educator.com.